Hey everybody, welcome to The Compound. I'm here with Michael Batnick, and we've got a special guest today. His name is Rob Copeland, and he is the author of what I would assume will be the biggest selling book on finance, at least of this fall and winter. Everyone's talking about it. It's called The Fund. Thank you, Michael. And it is the story of Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater, and the Bridgewater Fund, which the book is called The Fund. And I think Bridgewater, at one point, maybe still, was the largest hedge fund in the world. Do I have that right?
They're still calling themselves that. Yep.
Okay. By AUM, are they, or are they close, or they still are?
They're close. It depends. Some of their products, we could argue about whether it's a hedge fund or not.
Okay. All right. Michael and I read the book, and there's a lot of wild, crazy stuff in here. And I think a lot of people expected there to be. It's not crazy in the sense that, like, it's illegal or it's completely unexpected action. It's really more about how people within the company seem to interact with each other and some of the stranger cultural things that had been rumored about or blogged about online. But this is really the first time that somebody has extensively spoken with, I think you said dozens or hundreds of people who have been at the firm. So this is really now going to supplant all of the other writings about Bridgewater and I think effectively become like the inside story, the de facto insider story. Do you see it that way? Was that what you set out to do when you started writing?
Definitely. First of all, and I appreciate the compliments. And I hope it's the biggest selling finance book of the fall, the winter, the spring of the decade. Let's just keep going. I would say what I really wanted to do was to show people that this version of Ray Dalio that he spent so much money promoting, and that so many people have just taken hook, line, and sinker, is really not the complete version of Ray. And if you talk to really anyone around Ray, current or former at Bridgewater, they really never believed that version of Ray. And to me, in a way, it made my life easier because he's made himself so famous, and the truth is so different from what he's made it out to be.
Why was this so important? Why was it, other than the commercial benefits of having a best-selling book, why was this so important for you to show the other aspect of him that gets left out of, the literature and the celebrity? Like, why was this something that you wanted to personally pursue and spend this much time on?
Well, to be honest, it's a little scary to me how much and not just with Ray, but with a lot of really successful business people now, how much they're selling, not just that they're good at making money, but they're good at improving our lives. And Ray Dalio and the principles are all about how you should ignore your instincts, and you should really become a different person, and you should listen to him just because he's rich. And that to me is something that we should really probe deeply, as Ray would say. And the other thing I would say is, I've been reporting around Bridgewater for close to 10 years. When I started, he might have been someone that you and I knew, but it wasn't necessarily someone who was world famous. And then he writes this book, Principles, and then he gets all these titles, the Steve Jobs of investing, all these things. He just became more and more famous. And I really felt like an obligation to tell people what he's really like behind closed doors.
I remember coming across Ray Dalio in a book that I read in 2016 by Adam Grant, the professor at University of Pennsylvania, called Originals. And I remember being so impressed with that snippet of Ray Dalio about his radical transparency and him urging his employees to call everyone out and seek truth, including Ray Dalio himself. But after reading the book, it almost feels like, or not almost, it does feel very much like there was this radical transparency, but only of sycophants. Like, anybody who disagreed with Ray Dalio, raise your hand. And if you raised your hand, and not that you would raise your hand in public, you were gone. If you disagreed with him, you left. And so it was just left with however many employees that were either drank the Kool-Aid or were afraid to not drink the Kool-Aid for fear of whatever may come, which was often tears and much worse.
Well, not even if you raised your hand, by the way. There's a person in the book who is told by his colleagues that they just feel like he hasn't bought in. It's not even anything he's done. It's just it's like the energy coming off him. But I love that you brought up Adam Grant, because to me, Adam Grant and sort of this cohort of people who have just bought the Ray Dalio story, and they write about him, and then they get on his payroll. Adam Grant is literally being paid by Ray Dalio to quote unquote develop his principles tools. So I'll say about Adam, I reached out to him for the book. He told me he was too busy to talk, which is his right. And then I heard many months later from one of Dalio's attorneys that Adam Grant had been telling them all sorts of things about me. And I just said, this guy didn't even talk to me. This guy what are you talking about, a Wharton researcher? He's literally on the payroll. He's literally coordinating the attacks on me.
Rob, I know that you had to fight through a lot of potential legal issues and a lot of pressure. Obviously, Ray didn't want the book to come out, and Ray is wealthy and powerful and connected. And I know he fought tooth and nail. He didn't speak with you. He didn't want to speak with you for the book because, based on your reporting for the Wall Street Journal, he had a pretty good idea of the types of things that you were going to uncover, and what he would have assumed would be the direction, let's say, that you were going to take the book. Do you think that the book would have been different had he said to you, you know what, I wish you weren't doing this. There were a lot of sleeping dogs that I would rather let lie, but I get it. You're going to do it anyway. I want to have a voice in this book. Do you think the book would have been materially different had he taken that tack? Or do you think it pretty much would have come out the same, but maybe you would have gotten some reaction quotes in each of the chapters?
Well, he did say he would be interviewed for the book, but he had a condition, which is that I had to print his interview unedited in the book. And I responded to him and I said, Ray, I don't remember that interview with me being printed unedited in your book. So that sort of ended that one right there. Would it be different? I'm not so certain it would, because this is really the story of Ray Dalio through everyone else's eyes. I think we've heard Ray Dalio's version of the story over and over again.
Sure.
And I would have loved more information. I would have loved some cooperation from Bridgewater. But what I would have really loved is just the unedited recordings of so many of these things that happened at Bridgewater, because they did record almost everything at the firm. I'm not sure I want or need Ray Dalio's memory of them years later. Let's just see what it was like. And I think that would have been an improved book. Honestly, more information is better.
Rob, one of your sources said to you, the great thing about Bridgewater stories is I never have to exaggerate a single thing for it to be totally insane. I could only imagine some of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor that didn't make the book. Can you give us something that might not have made the book, or maybe something that's in the book? What was your favorite thing that you're like, this is just either so petty or so out there? I really can't believe.
It's got to be the piss case.
The
piss case is crazy to me, but I don't know.
By the
what's
way,
yours?
that quote, what the person said to me, if I can just paint a picture for you, he told me that while having a lovely lunch on Greenwich Avenue. I was just like, we are the worst people ever. It was like we're ordering $8 Arnold Palmers. The great thing about Bridgewater stories is they are always insane and they're true. The piss case has another element that several people told me that I just couldn't get comfortable with. So I'd like to just point out that it may not be, that what I'm going to say may not be true. Which is that someone told me that they actually sent out the urine or the liquid that was found under the urinal for testing.
For DNA?
Exactly.
Yeah, I believe it.
My God.
I believe it because that totally makes sense. But I couldn't quite get there on that. And there was enough crazy stuff. The other thing that I really left out was just how many interpersonal relationships there are at Bridgewater, just how many incidences of people really just going all in and cheating on their spouses and marrying someone at Bridgewater and just making their whole life about Bridgewater. And the reason I left that out was I tried not to put things in that that frankly might be true at a lot of financial firms. People meet their spouses at the office. So many people told me stories like, oh, this person destroyed their life and then they just made new Bridgewater babies. But I mean, maybe that's the sequel.
Well, there are people that would sign up for this even if they read the book, because one of the things that you talk about, they have secretaries making $200,000. They have people working in security and valet parkers and people who are making more money doing that at Bridgewater than they would from doing that job pretty much anywhere else. And that's not even to speak of the traders, the portfolio managers, most of whom are making 7 figures a year, some of whom are making 8 figures a year. I think that it would be fair to say, despite all these crazy stories and anecdotes and some of the examples of people running from rooms crying, even if you accept that all of those things happened and are true, there's still a lot of people that still work there, have never left, could very easily get a job somewhere else. They choose to stay, and they're willing to tolerate that aspect of the founder and the firm for the financial rewards, or they might actually appreciate being part of this very inward-looking, I don't want to say the word cult, but they might appreciate being part of this lifestyle where they work with this intensity and then they socialize. Like, how do you wrap your head around that concept? Like, there are people that actually like this and aren't leaving.
Well, I would say, as you guys know, asset management is a great business to be in if you're the asset manager. So there's a ton of money. You're right. People ask me all the time, well, why don't people just leave? And
Right.
they're getting, like you said, they're getting paid a ton of money. It's also what Ray is selling the employees on and the world on is the promise of self-improvement. He's telling you to change your value system. He's telling you your instinct is wrong. And I agree with you. I intentionally don't use the word cult in the book, except in quoting other people talking about it.
Right.
But that's a big appeal. And it's tough to leave when what you're leaving is the opportunity to do nothing short of, according to Ray, improve your life for the better.
So people have financially improved their lives for the better. You cite examples of people who joined the firm having worked at law firms, telecom companies, government agencies. They financially improved their life almost overnight by taking the job. But then there's like, yeah. So, all right. But then there's like the consequence of that is they're involved in this system of constantly being rated by others / rating others and informing on people who seem to be going against the founder's principles. And so like it's a trade-off, but you know, I thought it was interesting that there are people who can't take it and don't want to. And then there are people who go very far and stay and they're fine with that.
And there are people who are able to go home at the end of the workday. And
Yeah.
Jim Comey getting paid $7 million a year 10 years ago there, and say, well, this is a really well-paying job.
Sorry, finish your thought.
No, please.
So you spoke with obviously hundreds of former Bridgewater employees, and I'm guessing some current Bridgewater employees. There wasn't much in the book in the way of how clients felt. And I think your book said that most recently they managed $130 billion in client assets. So surely the clients must at least be happy enough to the tune of $130 billion in the various vehicles that they have. How do you think some of the clients feel about the inner goings at Bridgewater, and maybe having read your book, how do you think they would react to it? I'm sure this is, what you wrote is really the culmination of a lot of coverage. This is not necessarily shocking or breaking news, but how do you think the clients feel in general?
Well, there has been a lot of client turnover. They have lost money and they have replaced it with others. And if I can give Ray, honestly, not being sarcastic, if I can give Ray credit for something, he is truly a marketing genius. And there's no other hedge fund I know that could have the really insipid investment performance they've had for the last 13, 14 years and continue to attract all of this money. I did talk to a lot of clients. You're right that the book isn't necessarily a client-focused book. Ray and Bridgewater have a wonderful pitch, and that is, it's a heads I win, tails you lose. When they make you money, they say we're going against the grain, et cetera, et cetera. And when they don't, they say, well, you don't even want us to be, swinging for home runs every year. And that's a killer argument. He's not the only person on Wall Street to make that argument, but he might be the most successful.
Well, some of the strategies, though, are positioned to zig when the market zags, because clients have plenty of options if they want the upside of the market. They can certainly buy the index. They can buy long short people who are leveraged and picking the best stock. Like, there's a lot of different ways. I think from the beginning, especially like all weather, they kind of position as we're trying to survive in every type of market environment, not necessarily race a multi-year bull market. And that pitch resonates with pension funds and institutions who already have the other bases covered. Like, isn't it like, I guess worth mentioning, like, if that's what they set out to do, there are a lot of market environments where they succeeded to do it. 2008,
For sure.
2009 being like a pretty good example.
Just 2008. Sorry, not to. Unfortunately,
Fair.
you're talking to someone who has in his brain every
I understand.
year of pure
I
alpha up there.
But
Yeah.
Rob, to that point, the book was so heavy on what happens at Bridgewater, but very light on specific returns. Even though you discussed how they did at various points in time, why didn't you talk more about the performance? Because as a reader, I was sort of left wondering, like, they had good times, they had bad times, but overall, I mean, there are reports that they made more money for their clients on an absolute dollars basis than any other hedge fund ever. Now, obviously, it's a function of their size, but why didn't you get into the specific numbers? I'm curious.
Well, that's a fair question, by the way, and you're right. They have made more by some metrics than any other hedge fund. I think if you, I actually asked them to do this and they didn't. I'd love for them to dollar weight their returns. Let me know how the returns were.
Well, that's not their fault. We know how that goes.
Fair enough. But what Ray has become so famous for, honestly, to me, is more than just investing. Like, I'm thrilled to talk to you guys about the investing for as long as you'd like. But he's really, when he's getting interviewed by Gwyneth Paltrow, and she's saying you should run for president, it's not because he's a great steward of capital.
It's the philosopher king angle that puts him in that situation.
Well,
he sought that was sought after from the early days. The Steve Jobs comparison was very deliberate. You talk about how he kind of planted that seed, and then when that seed was planted, he amplified it. So I totally agree with what you're saying there.
Rob, I want to get back to some of the philosopher king stuff, which certainly is worthy in and of itself of the book, which obviously principles was a large portion of the book. And I want to make sure that we hit on the Walter Isaacson stuff. I thought that was wildly fascinating. But getting back to, you said Ray's a marketing genius. And early on in the book, this is one of the first things I said to Josh was this guy knew the playbook and he played the game earlier and better than anyone else did in terms of getting people to allocate. So here's a quote from the book, page 47, chapter Pure Alpha. Dalio talked up a coming depression in 1988, a 3-year recession starting in 1989, back to depression in 1990, was still beating the drum of depression in 1991, and had tweaked his call to, quote, a modern-day version of a depression, like a hangover after one of those great parties, but one that never goes away, end quote, in 1992. Quote, the U.S. economy is behaving essentially as it did in the 30s. Dalio said, which, by the way, he's still pounding that drum. He loves the 1937 analog. Quote, this is not a recession, it is a depression. And part of his pitch, and listen, I don't even necessarily think it's
all the bond guys do that.
But it makes sense. It's right. Fair. I don't think it's total bullshit. It's like, listen, if you're a pension fund and you've got hundreds of millions or billions of dollars invested to stocks and bonds, here's your slice that's going to be uncorrelated should any of the stuff that I'm saying come to pass. Like, that in and of itself is not too outlandish. And also, let's talk about sort of the process in the system. What he said was sort of irrelevant because a lot of it was really driven by whatever machine they created.
That's so I did something that I hope no one else ever has to do, which is that I read every single media article that Ray had ever been quoted in. I think I got to the early 80s and then it was microfiche and I just couldn't imagine myself doing that. And it was a big reveal for me, honestly, even his, unofficial biographer. that he had really been making the same call over and over and over again. We should say, by the way, I actually obviously gave Bridgewater the chance to comment on all of this, and I told them all of that. And they basically said I had been cherry picking, the quotes from over the years. And I said, well, isn't that really the point? That he's called it every which way. So no matter what happens, he can say, I saw it coming. By the way, he also loves to say that he's not seeking attention. Please, it's like a Broadway show. Like, please, not me. As he enters from stage left. But he had been seeking attention from the very first second.
He was on Oprah.
Guys, that took me so long to get. I'm so glad I had heard rumors he was on Oprah, but you can't just get her archives. I had to find the right person at Harpo.
It's not on YouTube.
It's not on YouTube.
Okay.
There was rumors that Bob Prince, his longtime partner, has a copy. He wouldn't give it to me. No, that took a long. When I actually saw that, and I saw this guy who claims that he wanted nothing else but to quietly become a billionaire, and he's on Oprah in the late '80s. That cost me $250, by the way. Oprah actually asked me for money for that clip.
Is one of the big takeaways that everyone in asset management wants attention, because it's less a financial business and more a communications business. And once you start from that premise, there is this asymmetric benefit of constantly predicting crises, which is that when the crisis doesn't happen, no one's really mad at you, especially if you're invested anyway and it's systematic. But when the crisis does happen and they remember you saying this is about to happen, the reward relative to the risk of being wrong is like 10 or 20x.
And even if you lost money, even if you didn't nail the crisis in your portfolio, so even if you got the call right and lost your existing investors' money, you still win.
You're right. You still win. You get to tell people, I saw it coming. You get new investors. Yeah.
And
I mean, you see that, right?
Well, and for the 2008 crisis, he even begins to change history. This was a real reveal for me.
Yeah, he was bullish.
He's bullish. He also called it every which way. He said, this is the big one, but then he says, this is not going to be a financial crisis. When he goes, and in his books, he goes back and he gives himself credit, he just quotes himself saying, this is the big one. He leaves out the part where he says, this is not going to be a financial crisis. I can't blame him, honestly. I don't know what I would do if I were so committed to promoting myself as like the seer, but it is remarkable that he gets away with it. He can just change history.
Rob, I want to ask you though, from Ray's perspective, he's written this somewhere. I think it was a subtweet about you and one of your Wall Street Journal articles maybe years ago, or maybe it was just a comment on the media in general. But one of the things he said is that, and I remember this because it kind of stuck with me. He said one of the reasons why we don't have any heroes anymore is the media's motivations now are different than they were, which we could debate. But I think he's talking about like mid-century, guys playing for the Yankees. They were horrible people, like Mickey Mantle. They were all drunks, probably a lot of them hating women, movie stars, politicians. But there was some distance between what the media was reporting versus like their real life. And obviously, as time has gone on, that distance has shrunk, and we have social media and TMZ and Twitter. And I think he was kind of talking about like, yeah, there's probably things about me that aren't perfect, but does everything have to be examined to within a millimeter? Like, can we have some mystique about anyone? And obviously that's self-serving because he's the subject that's being investigated in this case. But is there any resonance of that to you? Had there ever been a point in covering this guy that it's like, all right, maybe it's enough already, and let's just let people be imperfect, let people have flaws, and yes, he's getting away with stuff, but so what? He's also doing these things and those things, and he's providing jobs. Like, how do you feel about that conflict, or is it not a conflict for you at all?
No. I think that's a real. I really appreciate the question because I cover, and I've covered for my whole career. Really, I like to say I cover really successful people who are trying to be successful, and people who used to be successful. So there is a limit to that. I There's almost nothing in this book about his wife. She's never had a job at Bridgewater. I did not go around asking about that. I only asked about his son to the extent that his son used to work at Bridgewater, and that he's talked publicly about how the principals has helped him through what his son passed away. I agree there should be a limit. I also believe that when you put yourself out there and you tell people you have discovered the Holy Grail, I think you are inviting scrutiny, and particularly the way he describes this management system and the principles. I don't think that's off limits, and I actually truly. If you read the book, well, I know you're almost through, and Michael's finished it. I very rarely mention the name of a junior level employee, unless you were on the management committee or up. I really thought about that very carefully.
Rob, I want to ask you about this. Help me square the circle. So you wrote, the secret to Bridgewater's vaunted investment process, as Jensen explained late into that evening, was that there was no secret. Dalio was Bridgewater, and Dalio decided Bridgewater's investments. True, there was Jensen and Prince and the rest of the so-called circle of trust, a moniker that suggested an image of some grand investment meeting in the minds. But though more than one person may have weighed in functionally, only one investment opinion mattered. There was essentially no grand system, no artificial intelligence of any substance, no holy grail. There was just Dalio in person over the phone from his yacht, or for a few weeks, many summers from his villa in Spain, calling the shots. So you say that, and I'm like, man, unbelievable. But then you also say a little bit later on that Dalio's sort of calls were as much as 10% of the portfolio. So if that's the case, it does seem that at least the vast majority of Pure Alpha, if that's what we're talking about here, really and truly was, for the most part, systematic and non-discretionary, not just Ray's whims, I'm bullish, I'm bearish. So which one was it?
So you have to think, what does Ray Dalio consider a rule, quote unquote? And my findings, and talking to a lot of people, are that if Ray thinks of something and he says the euro is going to go up, he's going to consider that a rule, because that's a rule from his study of history.
It's crazy.
So that's
you see how crazy that sounds.
So
it's not systematic.
So his intuitions became part of the machine?
Correct. And he could, that 10%, as much as 10%, is me referring to him overriding those existing rules.
Okay.
Now, when you say this to people at Bridgewater, they look at you like you're dumb and they say, of course. Right. Like to them, that's not even a reveal. They're like, well, of course, it was just Ray's rules. We told you. We literally called them Ray's rules. But the
Jensen, I'm sorry. Jensen doesn't come off great in the book, and he's now the new Ray.
Well, he comes off better than Bob Prince did.
He comes off better than many, but do you think the quote unquote system or the machine is as influenced by the whims of Greg Jensen as it was the whims of Ray Dalio? Or do you think things have materially changed?
They have changed one thing very importantly, which is now they have an investment committee.
Right.
If they want to do those overrides. No one will ever be quite as influential as Ray was, in the sense that Jensen and Prince just did whatever he wanted for decades, literally. I still think that describing it as systematic is meaningfully misleading. Systematic to me implies, a quantitative system where, a Renaissance technologies type approach. Also, if you look at how Jensen has described it, he's still describing it in ways that make no sense. He's still saying, it's 50% human intelligence and 50% machine. It's like, stick to your story. There's a funny thing. I'll let you guys.
It's human artificial intelligence. What don't you understand?
Exactly. There's a funny thing. I'll let you behind the scenes here, which is, their lawyers sent me all these letters, and they kept using this number, 98. They kept saying the system is 98% XYZ. It didn't matter what happened, what description it was. It was 98% of the rules, 98% of the risk, 98% of the trades, to the point where, while I was reading these letters, it was just like, you would just say it's 90% of anything at this point. The number is always 98. It's never 97, never 99. They couldn't keep their story straight.
So you don't spend, at least as far as I've gotten, you don't spend much of the book talking about the system itself, or you talk a lot more about the principles, like the way that the employees are supposed to carry themselves and think. You talk a lot more about that than you do try to peel back the onion and get into like the investment machinery, like what makes them make this decision to buy or to sell. You don't really spend a lot of time on that. And I understand now because probably there's not much of a system there.
What investment machinery?
Right. Okay.
Like what the book would be very short.
Right. So, but I found that interesting because it would seem to me that from all the coverage while you were writing the book, it sounded from the outside like the lawyers were trying to stop you from revealing trade secrets. It turns out, though, based on the book itself, it wasn't about that at all. It was cultural secrets and anecdotes that could be embarrassing that they were really trying to squelch. Do I have that right?
Yeah, let's be clear. The lawyers were trying to bully me and my publisher, just as they've bullied former employees for years. So I'm really lucky not to get all jingoistic here, but in the United States of America, it really is an incredible place to be a reporter and a journalist. It doesn't work. You can send me all the letters you want. We'll read them. But the reveal of the book for me is that Ray Dalio is unprincipled. Full stop. The reveal on the investing is, once you realize that he lives in an alternative reality, it's like, well, of course, the investing also wasn't as he described it. How? Of course.
Rob, did you? I was surprised by some of the emails that you revealed in the book from Ray responding, and some of them were more, say, humane, for lack of a better word. Like I thought he came off decent in some of them. Was that your sense?
He's absolutely a human. I've spent time with him. He's been kind to me in person. The thing about, like Bad Blood, the Elizabeth Holmes book, which is great, is that Elizabeth Holmes in that book is a villain from the first page.
Yeah, Ray's not a villain.
I don't think of him as a villain at all. And what's really sad is many times the people that he hurt the most are people who he also, hugged
and loved. If he could, yeah.
And so that's really complicated. If you talk to the people at Bridgewater now, even now, they just have this sort of sadness to them because there is a genuine, I believe, effort on Ray's to pass along what he considers to be his lessons. And I wish he could see himself the way that so many other people see him.
Rob, it's ironic that Steve Jobs was such a big touchstone for him. And you tell this story about him sending employees to every Apple store in the area. He wanted them to buy as many iPod Touches as possible so that everyone in the firm could have one. And then, of course, he would upload the audio principles onto them. But still, he really had this affinity for Jobs, and Jobs was a son of a bitch. Even the people that knew him the best and loved him and respected him and admired him from up close, they would not shy away from sharing like how difficult he was as a person with his family, with his coworkers. Do you think that affinity that Ray Dalio had for Steve Jobs is like more meaningful maybe than just, I really love Apple's products? Like, you think there's more going on there subconsciously maybe?
That's a big question, honestly. I would point out one meaningful difference, which is that Steve Jobs let everyone around him talk to Walter Isaacson and encourage them to tell Walter those stories that we read. Ray Dalio has threatened people and paid them a lot of money not to say anything about him at all. So I'm not sure he's quite as open as Jobs. There is a big question, I think, of like, can you be successful and as successful as Ray Dalio and not have this side of you?
Only
Steve Cohen is not known
how many people are on that list of uber success that don't turn into maniacs? Buffett?
I think it's a short. Yeah, that's pretty much the list.
Right, like Thomas Edison was not a nice guy. Steve Jobs was not a nice guy. For the most part, to people that he didn't have to be. Like, it's. I guess maybe that's what I would love to just hear from you. Not that you wrote judgmentally, but what would you be like if you got to a place where people were throwing billions of dollars at you, and mostly it was because of your principles. And not that you would have concocted that, but I almost feel like you get to a certain point where you can't turn back. Like, it's not like he could have said in 2011, hey guys, this whole principles thing, it's not real. It's just me, Ray. We're picking gold, we're buying bonds. Like, you get to a point where you almost have to start believing in your own mythology.
I'm just a trend
I don't
follower.
know. Yeah, I don't know. How do you, I guess my question to you is, like, what would you be like if you were dropped into his seat and all of those things were going on because of stuff that you had done in the past?
But the thing is, sorry to cut you off. I know this is for Rob, but the thing is, he did it. He cultivated this entire time. It's not like he woke up a billionaire. Like, he built it. He built this image of himself. Yes. And also on the Buffett quote that I just said, I know Buffett's personal life is a whole other story. So I don't want to act like Buffett's like the picture of personal and pure success either. Speaking of the jobs thing, though, Rob, did you get a chance?
I want to hear how Rob answers that. I'm curious. Did you ever put yourself mentally in that position?
I've actually spent probably an unhealthy amount of time putting myself mentally in Ray Dalio's position. I honestly would hope that I would be able to hear the truth of what people were telling me. A big shock of this book for me, of the research, was all these emails that people had sent him in writing that he had replied to. So I knew he couldn't claim that he hadn't, where they're saying, Ray, you're harming people. Ray, our health insurance premiums are going up. We're prescribing too much therapy, all this stuff. And that he just could not only did he ignore it, but in many cases double down and is still going on TV and is still just apparently loving the attention that he was getting. I would hope that I have some close friends from, actually some of my best friends from, growing up, were some of my biggest fans while I was writing this book. And I would hope that I have people in my life who could grab me by the neck and just say, like, you're being a dick. Yeah. And then I would listen to them eventually. You'd probably have to tell me more than once. But you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain, you hope that you surround yourself
with.
I
have Michael for that. And
he
probably I need it. Probably once a week, he'll say, it wouldn't have killed you to say whatever you said this way or whatever. And he's not always right, but he's almost always right. But it's not even the point, right or wrong. It's somebody in your life that you do business with, but that you're also friendly enough that you respect their opinion. And you need people like that around you. At Bridgewater, the people around him were paid not to do that.
Well, he was pretending. They were all pretending that they were giving him that feedback.
Bob Prince knew better than to give feedback. Right.
Go ahead.
Well, I would just say Bob Prince didn't just know better. Bob Prince became a billionaire. Bob Prince's wife gave him as a Rolls Royce or a Bentley. It's in the book. He becomes a helicopter pilot. Like, Bob Prince had great fun with all this money, and was apparently able to ignore all of the pain going on around him.
Well, I thought the Bob Prince stuff, we'll leave it to people to read the book, but that was fascinating about how the money sort of owned him and all of that dynamics with him and Ray. So the reason why so much of this book is about the culture and the people instead of the financial aspect is because that's the image that he's worked so hard to cultivate. The book Principles, which almost became sort of a New York Times bestseller. I forget what happened there and what the story is there, and allegations of how many books he might have bought, which is, whatever. But he became obsessed with Steve Jobs, and now is he working on a documentary of himself? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But he read the bio by Walter Isaacson, who also just did the Elon Musk one, and he desperately wanted Walter Isaacson to do for him what he did with Steve Jobs, which is write a book, a biography of
or
Ray
what
Dalio.
He just did for Elon Musk.
For Elon, right. Did you get a chance to speak to Walter Isaacson about that interaction?
I did. And I will say, I asked Walter Isaacson, who I give him credit for talking to me. I said, did you get paid for that speech? He goes to Bridgewater. He gives a speech in the book. And I said, Walter, did you get paid? And Walter said, I don't remember. And I said, I would remember. I was like, I think I'd remember. So he cultivates not just Walter, but a lot of other important people, and pays them to basically aggrandize him. And it's, I think Walter's very fortunate that he didn't write that book. I'll say that.
So as we by the way, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. As we wrap up, we'll get to Michael, but my last question is: there's like this. There's like this. How could I explain it? There's this feeling in and around the firm that, despite the fact that Ray Dalio has retired as the CIO and is allowing the investment decisions to be made by others and by committee, there's this feeling like if he wanted to, or quote, felt like he needed to, he could be back in 5 seconds, like he never left.
Faster than Bob Iger.
Like, is that like how large he looms over that culture and the history? He is the founder. He did lead this company to be, the largest hedge fund ever. Like, what's your take on how realistic that is?
Yeah, I mean, guys, give me a break. Like, I don't care whose title is whose. Ray Dalio is Bridgewater. In one sentence, all he has to do is go on any television program and say, "I think they need me back." And they're
in fact, if the returns start falling, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, he's already. I actually reported this in the Times. He's already suggested to the board that he needs to start his own fund inside Bridgewater to help them and to compete with the people that he left behind. I mean, look, this is a guy who's been talking about retiring for 20 years. Retires and then basically immediately, within 3 months, starts talking about coming back to some degree. So,
Rob, last question from me. So A24 is making an Elon Musk movie, and I'm not a big fan of all of these business biopics that are coming out, but the Bridgewater story is one of people, and so I think it actually would be very fascinating. Who plays Ray Dalio? Have you thought about who plays Ray Dalio in the movie?
The show exists. It's Severance on Apple TV.
Oh my God, dude.
Well, we've sold it to Amazon. Amazon is developing it.
Okay.
Amazon is developing this.
You think it's a movie or it's a series, or you don't know?
I think it's a series. But I also have told them I hope it gets made. So you can make it a cartoon, so far as I'm concerned. For me,
my first thought, this is obviously not going to happen due to his history, but Kevin Spacey would have been in an alternate universe a great Ray Dalio.
Steve Buscemi's from Long Island. He does the side part with the hair.
That's a great call.
He's lean. He's like tallish and lean. It's Buscemi. It's got to be Buscemi.
Rob, who have you thought about?
So I've thought about Henry Winkler, because I think it needs to.
The
person needs to be kind. Well, it depends when you. Fair enough, but I think the right person to play Ray Dalio needs to be instantly trusted.
Well, you need a young Dalio too. You don't need it, but it would be like you need Chalamet to be 70s Dalio. Like there's got to be.
Chalamet plays me.
Oh, Chalamet's
yeah. What about Russell Crowe? Could he pull it off?
As what?
He's
Dalio.
got some more size than Dalio.
I don't know about that.
Well, I'm going to watch it if it comes out, and I hope it does. Rob, congrats on the book. It was fantastic. Really well done.
Thank you both for having me.
Yeah, so let's let everybody know, what is the official publish date? Is it out now? We got an advance copy, but is it out right now?
It's out now. The Fund, Ray Dalio, Bridgewater Associates, The Unraveling of a Wall Street Legend. They only have 2 copies left at the Westport, Connecticut Barnes & Noble, so they're getting more in.
Good for you.
I'm not surprised about that. Rob, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with the book. Good luck with the eventual series. We'll be watching for that. And thank you for giving us such an amazing backstory, inside look at how you did it. And we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, that's it from us, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.